So some common concerns that we see in school age kids, bullying is very common in these years. Kids are negotiating how to develop peer groups and also how to socialize other kids into those peer groups. Bullying may come from a desire to be accepted, because if the child doesn't really if a child doesn't feel accepted, they may bully others, or if a child is not accepted by the group, they may be bullied. Kids who are different, who don't fit in, are more likely to be bullied. Boys are more likely to bully physically, girls socially. And that social bullying can have some really long-term consequences. So historically, adults have kind of thought of bullying as just part of childhood. They let them handle it on their own. They'll get over it. Long-term, bullies who are not stopped as children tend to be bullies as adults. Okay, bullies may continue to bully as adults. Victims of bullying may self-harm, they may be depressed, anxious, and suicidal, even long-term, even long after they're out of that environment. So bullying is something that needs to be addressed by the adults. Kids are not just going to work it all out. Bullying is different from peer disagreements. Bullying has to do with power. So bullying is different from peer disagreements. Kids need to learn to work out disagreements with each other, but bullying has to do with abuse of power, and that needs to be addressed by adults. Unfortunately, frequently the adults are taking part in that bullying. Peer pressure, kids get around other kids and they do dumb things. You guys are aware of that if you've been around kids. Some of you are aware of that because you were kids not that long ago. I have a list of rules that were made at my house because of my youngest child and his friends. These are great kids. I love every one of them. I love having them at my house, but we've had to make new house rules nearly every time they come over. Things like playing arrow roulette or playing basketball from the roof of the garage, or playing freeze out in their underwear when it's 30 degrees outside. So kids get together and someone has an idea, and that peer pressure can lead kids to do things they would not otherwise do. Okay. So peer pressure can be positive, but it can also lead kids or influence kids to become involved in self-destructive or antisocial behaviors. Kids will do things they would not normally do because they're in a group. Adults do things they wouldn't normally do because there's a group and they get carried away, right? School, for kids, school is an important socializing influence. And in our culture, the majority of kids attend a school with their peers that are the same age. So our schools are typically divided by age. Some cultures socialize children into society differently, but this is the way our culture typically does it. So school is an important socializing influence. School entry is a big change in routine. So if kids have been at home with parents and then they go into school, they go from a routine that's focused on their needs to a routine that's focused on group needs. They may get some of that a little earlier if they've gone to preschool, but it's still a big change in routine for most kids. Parents can have as much difficulty with that adjustment as children do. Also, when kids go to school, they begin to be around people from other homes and they learn other ways of being and doing things. So they begin to be influenced by other children. They also have an adult in their lives who becomes another influence. We want to encourage parent involvement in schools. We want parents to be involved and support the school. We want the parent and school working together for the benefit of the child. You know that there are some families who choose to homeschool. There are a lot of different school options. There are public schools, private schools, charter schools, and there's a lot of political discourse about those, especially in our state right now. There are also parents who choose to homeschool. Children can be homeschooled effectively. Parents who homeschool need to make sure that they are giving that child access to the education that they need, and also that they're giving that child access to socialization. And those are very possible with homeschooling, but the parents may have to be more intentional about them. There are also concerns about the quality of education that's happening in school right now, and that's another reason that parents could choose to be involved. Another issue that may come up is what happens after school. So most daycares have an upper age limit. They do have some kids that come after school to the daycare, but it's pretty expensive, and there's an age limit. And after a certain age, they're not allowed in the daycare because they're concerned about the risk to younger children and the ability to supervise them. But also they may be too young to safely stay at home alone. And so there's this gap. We talk about latchkey kids. That's a term that was invented back in the 70s or 80s. And those were kids with what's when really both parents were working quite frequently, and the kids would come home after school and care for themselves. So what that means is that some kids are not really adequately supervised after school, and that may not be completely in the parents' control due to work requirements and lack of options. So kids that don't have adequate supervision are more likely to be fearful and anxious, or they may develop a lot of risk-taking behavior. They may also have to remain in the house for safety or perceived safety reasons, and that decreases their physical activity and socialization opportunities. So one of the options is there are some after-school programs available where kids can stay in a program with other children after school. Okay, next we're going to talk about discipline.